see that it's clear the director of the movie decided that my role was to worry. Every time the camera turned on the poor guy fixed to play me, he had his chin in his hands and his brow was furrowed. He was worried. But I had to do more than worry. I was in as a holdover from the speech writing.
Right.
I still had to put some words on paper. One came early in our deliberations when the idea, everybody's first idea was a surgical airstrike. Send bombers, knock the missile sites out. Bobby Kennedy, who had a moral core, said yes, and then we'll kill a lot of innocent Cuban civilians working at the site. Got to notify people when we're going to drop bombs.
Did he make an analogy to Pearl Harbor?
And he said that's Pearl Harbor in reverse.
Yeah.
The Air Force wasn't too happy about notifying their targets. I was asked to draft a note from Kennedy to Khrushchev to be delivered by a secret high-level emissary. Once I had the assignment, everybody began to weigh in on their conditions they thought. They said, don't make it an ultimatum. Superpowers don't respond to an ultimatum. Don't make it complicated. Khrushchev will just negotiate the complicated provisions for months while he finishes the missile sites. And don't make it too one-sided, or posterity will blame us for mankind's final war. I went back to my office, tried drafting a message that would meet all those conditions, and finally came back and reported it was impossible. Of course it would sound like an ultimatum. It was an ultimatum. And so that was one specific rule I had besides worrying. And finally, after there was a consensus in favor of the quarantine or blockade, and I was in the group that favored that option, when we called the president back from Chicago. As I mentioned on a news conference earlier today, the president felt that all of us should keep to our commitments and regular schedules, not to let people guess if there was some emergency that was causing everyone to stay in the White House. So he had, the next day, Wednesday the 17th, that's why I can't believe that anybody's talking about canceling or postponing the debates now because there's a crisis. The president didn't cancel the election. He didn't cancel even his own campaign schedule. He went to Connecticut to make a speech the next day while the rest of us were meeting. Came back and the meetings resumed. And on Friday, he went to Midwest and Chicago. And on Friday evening or Saturday morning, Bobby, the Attorney General's brother, called him. He said, we've reached a consensus. Please come back. And when he had landed, I handed him a one-page memorandum, which I think's in the book, which summed up, in my views, what I thought was the irrefutable case for the quarantine option and the irrefutable case against the surgical bombing followed by an invasion option. Then, after the president selected the quarantine option, he wanted to deliver a speech on the evening of Monday, October 22nd. He'd only learned about it on October 16th. We had completed our work and had a response ready to announce on 6 days later, on October 22nd. And that was the speech in which he told the American people what we had discovered and what we were determined to do about it. I have been asked about this all over the country for the last few years. And sometimes men about your age, Greg, come up to me afterwards and thank me for making the president's speech to the country that night so scary they were able to convince their girlfriends it was the last night on earth.
That must have been the ultimate date movie.
So we continued to be in session. There were high points and low points. And finally, on Friday night, October 26th, a letter came in from Khrushchev through a secret back channel that I tell about in the book also. I was involved a little bit in that secret back channel. And that letter from Khrushchev, even though it was full of threats and denial, also had buried within it at least the seeds of a possible peaceful resolution of the crisis. On Saturday the 27th, the EXCOM, as it was called, the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, the name we just made up, there was no such name, to decide what to do about that letter. And the day was full of bad news. Another letter came in. This one not from Khrushchev personally. It sounded like it was written by the Soviet military presidium. It was stiff in tone and said that they weren't going to do anything unless Kennedy took NATO missiles out of Turkey. Can't do that in a hurry by ourselves. Then we got a briefing from the CIA that the overflight planes had shown that the missile sites were just about completed and ready to fire. We were meeting in the cabinet room. Today, I'm told the cabinet room has become a reinforced concrete bunker, safe from outside bombardment. It wasn't then. So we knew if we took the wrong course, that would be our last meeting. Also, other bad news. One of the U-2 planes over Cuba had been shot down. The only fatality of the entire crisis. The low-flying reconnaissance planes, which Kennedy never fully liked because they were easy targets, were fired upon by Cubans. But the shooting down of the U-2 plane could only have been done by a Soviet surface-to-air missile. And the military insisted that because we needed that high-flying reconnaissance to give us eyes on what was going on, that we would have to retaliate and bomb that surface-to-air missile. Kennedy said, we have time enough to decide that, let's wait. Let's wait and see how this correspondence turns out. Then I think you mentioned this at dinner, I forgot. Then in the middle of all this tension, on the edge of war, a note comes in from the Pentagon that an Air Force, I think it was a fighter plane based in Alaska, had been sent out to sample the air to see if the Soviets were testing their nuclear weapons in preparation for war. The truth of the matter is, we were testing our nuclear weapons. This fighter plane had navigational controls which malfunctioned, and he flew it. How do you lose your way when the North Pole is only one way to go? That's south. Anyway, he flew out over Siberia, over Russian territory, when both sides are on the edge of war. The Soviets understandably thought this was the beginning of World War III and scrambled their jets. That was the message that came in. It was received in stony silence, broken by JFK saying, well, there's always one son of a bitch who doesn't get the message. So then we had to decide about the two different letters. And again, we sat around the table, arguing. Tommy Thompson, who was the wisest among us, a career Foreign Service officer who had been ambassador to Moscow, he even knew Khrushchev personally. He said, ignore the second letter. Answer the first letter. Bobby Kennedy and I said, yes, that's what we should do. And I pointed out that there were some parts in that first letter that could receive a constructive response. Finally, the President said, all right, you two go draft the letter reply.